Welcome back to the Hearthstone Wild Open. I'm Robert Wing, joined once again on the desk by my good friend Nathan. That's Admirable Zamora. Nathan, we've seen the rest of the West. I think it's time to see the best of the West.
You know, I admitted to Soddle very recently I thought Europe was playing better than the Americas region where the playoffs were concerned. So I'm still on the fence with you there. I respect your opinion, but I respectfully disagree.
Obviously, as an American, I have to joke and protect the pride of our country, but we both know Europe is probably the better.
Yeah, we both know we're out of pride.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at the format. If you're just joining us, this has been, so far, a very interesting tournament. We've seen some unique decks, some unique approaches, but this all began with a 64-player ladder qualification process in May for the Wild Ladder, which has led us now to this double elimination bracket with the top 2 players from each region qualifying for a live finals taking place early July. At this live finals, it'll be 8 players in a single elimination bracket with $25,000 on the line. So some big stakes for Wild, which has up until this point necessarily not had the most competitive love.
Right. Now that's been thrown into the mix, you've seen a lot of pro players throw their hand into the mix and try to qualify for this event. So far, we have 4 players who are qualified for that live final event, and I cannot wait to see who we're getting from the Americas and from Asia Pacific later on.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at those 4 players who have qualified already. All right, we'll take a look at the schedule. We just finished up in Europe where we had 2 players make it through. General obviously put on a little bit of a clinic. It was a little bit of a harder road for Alb. Americas is where we are now though. We have 4 really, really talented players. I've been doing a lot of research on them. Very excited that we get to cast their matches, but really the highlight of my day, being honest, is going to be Asia Pacific taking place a little bit later on. Asia Pacific, at least for the Hearthstone Championship Tour, and in some of the global tournaments, always brings kind of their weird, flavorful decks, and I'm looking forward to seeing that.
And Korea is where one of the first Wild tournaments took place, where Reynad was competing in the event. He showcased a lot of zero-cost minions, a la Murloc, Tinyfin, Wisp, and Divine Favor, to show you that there's a lot of ways to go in that format in terms of deck building.
All right, well, if you missed out on what happened in Europe, we made a short little recap for you, so you can go ahead and take a look here. In the top, it was General, and General just really did show his stuff. He brought a control-heavy lineup, and let's be honest, this one wasn't even close.
He really had some dominating spots, and a lot of it comes down to drawing the key cards that are in your decks. But his Reno Warlock game, breezy easy once he got past the sticky turn where Reno Jackson, he wasn't even looking that strong as the matchup happened. Bertic versus Zero. Bertic came into this one, it looked like he was a little bit favored, but the early start from Zero completely squelched his ability to control the board, and that damage crashing in means that Zero moved on, and then Alb, with his second chance at glory, gets there with good old-fashioned Pirate Warrior.
All right, so we now have half of the field decided for this Wild Live Finals taking place in July. We see from China, it is Shen Haiyi, SH Royal Baze, and then from Europe it's General and Alb 987. 4 players left to be found. These TBD guys, we're going to get them out of here. They're pretty boring. Yeah. We don't like them.
TBD just couldn't quite cut it for us. So we're going to find someone else other than TBD for this one. Americas too, like you mentioned, some pretty quality players coming into this one, notably Silent Storm. Back into the competitive foray. He's been quiet for a little bit here, but it seems when this guy really wants to play tournaments, he comes a game.
Sure. Well, we've been kind of highlighting some of the differences between Wild and standard decks and kind of what you can expect to see. Again, these aren't really playlists. These aren't deck lists that we're seeing that are actually going to be necessarily in the tournament. It's just some of the major differences between the 2 archetypes. Let's go ahead and take a look at Pirate Warrior now, which we just saw in that last series. Nathan, there is one card on here, on this set in front of us, that absolutely makes Pirate Warrior in Wild.
Oh, yeah. It's Nazos First Mate. I'm kidding. It's actually Ship's Cannon, top second column, first row. That card delivers a punch when it comes to those extra pirates. You thought Knife Juggler was a bad boy. Well, wait till those juggles deal 2 damage apiece. And then, of course, Deathbite being an upgraded Arcanite Reaper, so to speak. The ability to synergize well with Frothing Berserker makes that an exceptionally powerful tool.
Right, Ship's Cannon obviously never saw a whole lot of play when it was, in its prime in Standard, but in Wild has found new life. Let's go ahead and take a look now, though, at mid-range Hunter. And, Hunter is a class I've played a ton of over the years, and the card that jumps out to me immediately is Mad Scientist. Mad Scientist for Hunter back in the day, being able to play those premium board-affecting secrets and not having to pay the mana cost, getting the tempo, getting a 2-drop minion on the board, being able to, get the freezing trap, the explosive trap without paying for them, was huge, and now they obviously have access to Mad Scientist again in Wild, and it certainly makes the deck a lot more powerful, I would say, than it is maybe in Standard right now, where it's kind of in a weird spot.
Yeah, you run into patches a little bit more often in Standard, I'd say, and in addition to that, the tempo you generate with Hunter is a very necessary tool. It's why you see Pilot Shredder in this deck, just a difficult menu to deal with. Right. Loth have been there to shut off spells and get those big pushes through. Hunter is much more powerful in Wild, I'd say, than it is in Standard right now.
Yeah, it's a great analysis, Nathan, but we're ready. It's time for the lowering of the Hearthstone Wild Open Horde. That is the sound of freedom, if you are wondering. We see here the top 64 Americas players that made it all the way through the May ranked play season. And some names you should definitely recognize here. We see Phone Tap, LBYS, Frozen, just to name a few.
Yeah, Frozen, of course, runner-up at the Bahamas for the Winter Championship. Rosti was the runner-up at the Summer Americas Championship last year. Phone Tap had a storied career behind him. You see Sidonia at number 17. He actually won the Summer Championships for Americas, and that same place where Rosti was. And the asterisks, that's where you see players who are still in the top 4.
Yeah, we see Control and MeknugetZz thus far making it through. Jinja Ninja will be joining them. Want to highlight Strivecrow. This is certainly, when you think of a tournament like this, who's good at approaching the game and really thinking about it from a wide angle. Strivecrow is certainly a name that you expected to see.
And at number 47, Ant, America's champion for spring this season. He'll find himself in Shanghai very shortly, and there, the 4th competitor, Silent Storm. This guy's been such a strong competitor every single time. Hot Meowth at 53 was a world championship competitor last year. The field for Americas as well as Europe, they all came to game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. But these 4 players now who represent the Americas bracket, we've got an eclectic mix here. Control, someone who actually streams full-time as a Wild Ladder player. He was actually just recently on the Blizzard launcher all over the social media for Hearthstone, is being promoted as a Wild player, taking on MeknugetZz, who, MeknugetZz, from what little we have heard about him, is someone who tends to dance in both Standard and Wild. But Jinja Ninja and Silent Storm rounding out what is frankly a very, very qualified group when it comes to Ladder specifically.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about Control. He goes by Control the Boar. A lot of times when I see him, when I first started playing Wild, he was the player I looked to for the stock list and where to start. And Secret Paladin was a big deck back then, but he was constantly showing there's a lot of different ways to play Paladin. You can use these Murloc lists with Finja, and anything can happen instead of Zoth. You can use Pirate Warrior. You can try out these Druid decks where I'm not necessarily convinced that 2 Innervates is the correct thing to do in aggro Druid. And that is like an astonishing thought to me that you wouldn't play 2 Innervates. It's one of the best cards in the game, period. But he has a wealth of experience throughout all of Wild and continues to show why his prowess is the way it is. He practices a lot, and here he is, top 4.
I spoke with him a little bit, and he was very clear on the fact that he absolutely believes that the players who've been playing Wild for some time now have the edge over the Standard players who are just kind of dipping their feet in the pool. He says they think about the game differently. They understand what cards you can utilize better, and that's one of the biggest things in Wild is you have so many different options. For MeknugetZz, he hasn't necessarily had that much success on the public stage, but he was actually competing as recently at DreamHack Austin. He was out there competing in the Grand Prix. He's someone who's grinding those open cups. So, Nathan, what do you make of the bans? Both Shaman's gone.
Shaman is certainly one of the most powerful decks that's out there right now. It is the most popularly chosen class within the Americas region. 41 players chose to bring Shaman, and it has a pretty significant win rate out of those as well. But Warrior, this is a class to be reckoned with. The second most popular that's out there as well. 39 players chose to bring it. So when I see both Warriors left up and I see Priest in the mix, I'm expecting some Galaka Crawlers to fight back.
Sure, we see MeknugetZz bringing Mage now. Mage was the 3rd most represented class out of the Americas specifically now. Now, Mage has a couple different ways, or rather 3 different primary ways you can go about it, but how do you expect it to interact with so much aggression from these lineups?
A lot of times I would expect it to be either Freeze Mage or a Reno Mage. The Reno Mage decks have historically performed very well versus aggressive lineups, and here MeknugetZz, he's going to be leading with what looks like a Reno Mage list to me, and Control's going to lead with aggro Druid. And in this matchup, MeknugetZz is really the player with the onus. He has to handle the pressure that Control is going to throw at him, and if he can't offset it very early on, you could be looking at some quick ends with Savage Roar or Mark of the Lotus.
Now, if you missed our series from Europe, the tail there was that Control was just absolutely dominating aggressive decks. And
the Control archetype, that
right,
is.
the Control. Well, yeah, Control thus far has yet to dominate anybody. We'll have to see. But when you come to Reno Mage now, and Reno Warlock, and these different decks that are required to play one of each decks, they really grow in power as sets continue to come out, because you have these premium cards that are running one of just is so powerful that they're standalone, you don't even need necessarily two. What are some cards, Nathan, that you've seen from Standard that have kind of made a difference in the Reno decks thus far in Wild?
Kazakus is the big one to note. Of course, that card is incredibly powerful and was a big upgrade to all of the Reno-style singleton play one of decks. But Arcanologist is a card I think a lot of players have just simply been overlooking. It's a very powerful tool as a 2-mana 2/3 that just gets a card out of your deck. The access of being able to play the Secret when you want to play it means that sometimes you can run Counterspell, you can run Duplicate more effectively. But the big one that stands out is, to me, is just Doomsayer, and how Doomsayer has continued to develop in metagames throughout Hearthstone's history. Very early on, players shied away from the card. They thought it was fairly poor, but as we started to realize that tempo was the central fundamental piece of Hearthstone, that card has more and more often been coming into control decks.
Right, and some of the ways you can approach getting secrets out of your deck, aside from the Arcanologist you mentioned, is that Mad Scientist. And because you have access to it, you have basically one of each. And they provide redundancy in terms of making sure your secrets get out of your decks and actually in play. So, yeah, you can only run one Arcanologist, but the Mad Scientist is kind of the co-op partner to that. Kind of diminishes, yeah. He's like, let me show you how it's done, Whippersnapper. We don't even pay the mana for the card. We just pay for the body. But yeah, it kind of reduces some of the risk you run into inherently by running a singleton deck.
Yeah, and here Doomsayer showing why it's such a strong card, being able to really punish control in terms of his initial opener here. And Arcanologist, I think, is playing a fantastic role here. Just again, as the 2/3 body, it's pretty significant as this combat rolls out. And for control, you notice he played the Haunted Creeper right into that Doomsayer. He knows he has to get pressure rolling. That's the only way he wins this game. He eats his Pirate right away with a Galaka Crawler, and we're off to the races here. MeknugetZz, well, that is a really strong draw. If he finds himself stable on turn 6, MeknugetZz is very likely to run away with this game. Control showing a lot of frustration.
I like what we saw here. Go ahead, eat the Pirate with the Galaka Crawler. Don't let your opponent do it. Just go ahead and get the buff. Make the 3/4. You got the damage out of the patches, at least the 1 damage with the charge, so you're kind of mitigating risk there by making sure that you yourself are actually getting the buff and playing that Crawler out of your hand. But yeah, adding Reno to the hand for MeknugetZz, this kind of continues a trend of what we've seen today. You have enough kind of early game tools to get you there, and then Reno into the hand on 6 is obviously exactly what you want with that in the deck. Just the flexibility to use it whenever you want, play some degree of brinksmanship.
And Finley here adding a lot as well. Sir Finley was such a big loss to the aggressive decks when it rotated out of Standard. And you're seeing that power here. Why? Control now having access to 2 extra cards a turn. You know, what does he do with extra damage from the Druid Hero power? He doesn't really care about that. But 2 extra cards, that puts MeknugetZz in a position where he has to check the pressure of the board every single turn. That's a difficult thing to do when your spells are fairly costly, when it's Meteor or when it's Sludge Belcher. Those cards can get stuffed if Control continues to put together an assault. But once again, we're seeing the Arcanologist extra health make a difference. And just the power of these old tools that you can't really use anymore. Even Flame Cannon likely to play a pretty significant role here.
League of Explorers in general, though, the legendaries were so impactful. You know, we saw Bran, we saw Elise, Finley, Reno. That as a set was really predicated on the legendaries, it felt like.
Control just continues to look nervous in this position. You know, this is a matchup where I don't think he's 100% comfortable. It is fairly poor, I'd say, with the amount of resources MeknugetZz has that fights against positions like this one. But boy, is he showing it.
That said, though, I do think playing that Living Mana when he played it, he made the read, okay, the Mage is going into 5, Blizzard won't be online. Hopefully we don't run into a Volcanic Potion or something and we can actually get something done with this Living Mana. So even though I agree, he definitely looks like he's a little bit nervous, really stressed out about this situation, he is certainly making the plays thus far that I think give him the best chance to win against what is kind of an uphill battle deck for him.
Yeah, and that's really the most important facet of Hearthstone is risk assessment. Even when your back's against the wall and luck shuts the door, you got to open up the window, and that means taking risks and really trying to drive the point home. Here he gets to poke through for some extra points of damage, and he's even adding more pressure to the board. He says, yeah, well, if he's got Blizzard, I'm not going to beat that card anyway, so let's play as strong against it when he doesn't have it.
Okay, so no Blizzard in the hand. Meteor really doesn't do necessarily a whole lot here. MeknugetZz choosing to go ahead and develop the Ice Block and just ping off one of the minions, say, hey, I have the Ice Block, I'm safe, I have the Reno in hand. This could be a situation where I just want to get one of the minions off the board. Otherwise, what was I going to do? Meteor to clear board?
And this is where the nightmare starts to happen for Control. It's these turns where just turn after turn he throws his cards on the board, hopes they live through the turn. He's living and dying by whether or not MeknugetZz has an answer here. This Flame Strike, devastating to what Control has spent this entire game on thus far. Reno Jackson in hand, Antique Healbot, Meteor to back this up. Control is going to need a perfect string of draws to find himself at the advantage.
I do want to highlight the Echoing Ooze in hand for Control. It is a card that when you think of Wild Druid, it's certainly in the conversation, benefits heavily from the buffs. We haven't been seeing it for a lot of players thus far, at least from the Europe region.
Yeah, this is a card that I think goes in and out of this deck depending on what kind of metagame you expect. Against more controlling metagames, I think Echoing Ooze operates a little bit better, just because it's providing 2 bodies on board immediately, rather than the resilience of a body back behind. I would say against aggressive matchups, typically having something more annoying to deal with is a little bit better than just having extra right now. It depends on the situation. You know, sometimes the tech card changes as well, but Echoing Ooze gets a great benefit when you're able to buff it with Power of the Wild, with Mark of Yashiraj, with Mark of the Lotus, any of those things.
Even Defender of Defender of Argus, which you see sometimes.
Duplicates that buff as it comes out.
All right, well, there is a Flame Strike, and that is a clear board and a happy board, at least for MeknugetZz.
Yeah, and this is not the happiest of turns for Control. This is a fairly weak reload.
The Warlock Hero Power Life Tap certainly helping, certainly getting him access to more cards, but at this point he's just playing his small things and saying, hope something sticks. I have the Savage Roar. Maybe I can make something happen.
Yeah, Reno Jackson here I think is likely to make his appearance. It wouldn't be surprised to see Brandon Antique Healbot, though. That's acting as a pseudo Reno Jackson, and he gets 2 bodies on board instead of 1, so you're able to chop through the minions more effectively. I think any way you slice this, you're looking at healing from MeknugetZz this turn.
Yeah, maybe with Reno, if you could ping and kill something on the board, you can't do that, though. So I kind of like here just going for the Brand Healbot, save the Reno for later. It could potentially be a larger heal.
Yeah. Like maybe Control just happens to have 2 Savage Roars, burst you down, and pops your Ice Block. Reno's a little bit better in that situation than just the 16 healing alone. 16 healing alone right here is bringing him to full, but looks like he's going to Meteor and just chop out cards from Control. Honestly, I like this too. I think it's all roads to El Dorado for MeknugetZz at this point.
I mean, even if your block is popped, like it's probably going to have to come off something, at least 1 Savage Roar with something else. So at that point, you can go ahead and just Reno. You're fine. There's not a wide board.
Well, Jeeves gets drawn. And MeknugetZz does not have a guaranteed answer to that. Flame Cannon hits a random minion on your opponent's side of the board. So great when you can isolate targets. This used to be one of the most powerful tools that you could have against Shade of Naxxramas, if you remember that being played in mid-range Druid. But Jeeves now drawing 3 cards and a chance to draw more unless MeknugetZz finds an answer.
All right, so second Jeeves, Power of the Wild, and Living Mana. So he definitely gets some gas there with the draw. Those are certainly tools he wants to see, but he is aware that every turn, if MeknugetZz doesn't have Reno, gets him closer to Reno. So the clock is very real. Obviously, we know that MeknugetZz has a wealth of healing options.
Right, and that wealth of healing options is likely to play a very critical role. This turn, MeknugetZz chooses to load up the board. So he would have lost his Ice Block had he chosen to go for the Antique Healbot sometimes. It would have required a perfect sequence from Control, but this is full steam ahead if you're in Control spot. 2 buffs, Jeeves on board, giddy up.
Control had a very visceral reaction to the Bran Antique Healbot coming down. Certainly a situation where a lot of us aggro players back in the day had very similar reactions to that combo. Was not something we were always super welcoming of.
And this is really interesting here. Control's instinct is to run the 1/2 into Bran and then get the extra token from Living Mana. He could have had access to extra power this turn. He's doing this to fully wipe out the Bran this turn with the Jeeves.
Yeah, I realizes Bran left on the board could potentially just be too big. There are too many battle cry effects that he thinks could go haywire.
Well, suddenly this position looks really scary for MeknugetZz. He doesn't have a way to stop this board pressure. He's already used Flame Strike. Alex Straza offensively doesn't look like that bad of a tool. It's probably the most pressure he can get going this game, but...
That's a really good point. With the Flame Strike gone, even if you Reno, you still have to bring the board to heal. Reno's going to heal you, but if you're just continuing to pummel him after the fact for large amounts of damage, what is Reno actually accomplishing?
Right, I mean, this is 27 power on board for Control, and if MeknugetZz chooses to not wipe out the Jeeves this turn, he's going to add more to this potentially and draw extra cards. Like, the extra card draw is really keeping Control in this game. Jeeves illustrating its power fully in this game.
All right, so we've seen Meteor, we've seen Flame Strike. What are you still missing here? Potentially a Frost Nova, definitely a Blizzard. Kazakus.
It's looking like a Flame Cannon and Dr. Boom turn.
All right, I think this was the card a lot of players were expecting to see when Wild was first announced. What is that one card that just rotated out that caused nightmares? And it was Dr. Boom just across a wide number of decks. So much raw power in this card.
I believe this is an Ice Block pop this turn if Control wants it. That's a big deal.
Yeah, going to have to commit the Mark of the Wild, but it would certainly be to a worthwhile cause.
I think so as well. And then also the Jeeves, a weaker minion in terms of power, but certainly a priority threat if you're in MeknugetZz spot. The card generation of that is a very real threat. And I'm surprised to say it, but I think MeknugetZz is in a bit of trouble. Wow.
It's the power of Jeeves. It's the ability to draw that many cards. And some of the earlier games we saw that didn't necessarily always pan out for the Druid, but that was a lot of the cards that helped him actually build a durable board.
And Control still looks nervous about this. Dr. Boom going to make the first trade. Control has just been visibly upset for a lot of this game. He understands that this situation is dire. Boombots do a reasonable job, but not quite where he wants.
And you got to think this is the Reno turn.
Oh, yeah.
This has to be the Reno turn.
Absolutely.
Alex Straza really does not gain you much purchase whatsoever. Instead, just choosing to go ahead full heal, put up a big board, and say, okay, we got to fight for it, honestly.
Yep. It's 13 power. He's still facing down.
And he gets a card from Jeeves. Making Jeeves work for you. And he was a robot butler, so he was working.
Can I help you, Zach?
Wow, that is a breathtaking impression. I'm going to be honest, every single time I hear Jeeves, I just want to boot up WoW and just go play an engineer.
I love Jeeves.
Yeah.
Ah, Jeeves.
Look at him. What a gentleman. He's got a little...
Is that a hot towel?
Bib? Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a butler. Why wouldn't he have a hot towel? Come on.
Innervate's a fairly dead draw for Control at this stage. Who now that he's seen Ice Block, he's seen Flame Strike, he's seen Reno Jackson. How much room does he have left to play with in terms of a defensive mechanism? Is he actually trading in the Jeeves in this spot? Wow.
I mean, he only has 5 cards left in the deck, so that maybe... Now, don't get me wrong. You want to get those cards,
no,
but
you're right. You're right. I mean, Life taps his hero power. His life is fairly expendable at this point.
He's drawn through almost the entirety of his deck between Jeeves and the Life Tap hero power, and that is the dream as the aggro deck. You seldom get to do that.
MeknugetZz, does he have significant defense from this? I know there's a Mistress of Mixtures.
Shimmering Tempest.
I believe there's a Sludge Belcher in there. There's a couple of Boombots.
Well, he's definitely got the bigger board now. His health is in a reasonable spot.
Power of the Wild. Is there a Savage Roar? Savage Roar gets drawn. And I don't know the damage on this. I haven't even come close to counting it, but I know Control's playing both of these cards this turn.
He is definitely going to do that. I do not think it's actually going to necessarily be the backbreaker he needs it to be. MeknugetZz is just at a point where through N'Zoth, and this is why N'Zoth has played in this deck, he now just has a board.
Yeah.
He can actually start battling on his own terms.
And Control's looking at trades here. You know, this is signaling to me that there's no direct damage in this deck, that it is purely minion combat that has to get this done. But at this stage, I'm not sure minion combat gets it done. I think to ship it to face and hope for the best.
It always feels so bad, though, to hit someone in the face when you see the Mistress of Mixtures right there. Yeah, it's only 4 health, so you have to, you know, turn off your feelings and turn on your mouth and say, okay, it's just 4 health, but it always just feels so bad.
That's a checkmate. Control knows the rest of his deck and says there is no way for me to secure lethal damage here. Game 1, MeknugetZz.
Once again, the aggro druid falling in the face of a Control deck.
It's just, Control is very powerful when it knows what to play against. That's a big factor for early on metagame. You see aggressive decks typically dominate. You don't know what the aggressive decks look like. You can't bring the right tools. If you don't have the right tools for the job, you can't get the job done.
There's so many good early game tools, though, for the Reno deck in Wild. There's just a wealth of options to choose from, and we've seen that thus far. With Reno decks, what you're in theory sacrificing by playing to that singleton condition is consistency. But as more and more cards come out and you have more options to choose from, you actually just get more consistency. You can build your deck to have powerful tools that fit the necessary curve that allow you, even if you didn't have Reno in the opening, to get to that Reno and survive long enough to win.
It was a lot closer than I expected it to be as well, I have to say. The fact that Control was able to get a Flame Strike from MeknugetZz and then land a double buff onto Living Mana, that game was a lot closer than I anticipated it being towards the end there. But just, you know, right powerful cards, Reno Jackson, Ice Block, they'll do a lot in those circumstances.
All right, well, both of these players had to battle through a long list of opponents to get to this spot. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of them now. Do want to point out MeknugetZz had to actually get by Ant, who, as you were mentioning, was one of the players we'll be seeing in Shanghai.
Yeah, and Silent Storm waiting in the lower bracket to see who he's going to have to face. It's a loser of this match. It has one more shot to make it to that live finals. Ginger Ninja was defeated by Control, who's also in a similar fate.
All right, well, next game is going to be Warrior versus Priest. So Priest in Standard is certainly in such an interesting spot. We've seen it really develop new life. You know, there was a period prior to the Year of the Mammoth where it was pretty much hinged on getting that good curve, playing that Dragon Priest, kind of beat him down style, Draconid Operative, obviously in a vacuum, one of the most powerful cards in Hearthstone right now. But Priest has a couple different ways it can be played, and that's kind of trickled down to Wild.
Yeah, and in the Wild versions, the fact that Priest has always been fairly limited in terms of its competitive potential. You look at it in Standard, right now, it's about the best it's been, and it's in the middle of the pack. But in Wild, they have access to so many more options that their earlier turns are just more powerful. It's a deck that you can often overlook until you get to the right situations, and I think Deathlord is one of the key cards to that deck. There's not a lot of strong ways for Priest to defend itself early on, but Deathlord is certainly one that packs a punch. Even if you see a giant minion come out of this, sometimes you have Shadow Word Death waiting in the wings.
Well, speaking of packing a punch, it is Pirate Warrior. Control playing aggro.
That's classic.
Classic. No ship's cannon, though, so you don't have to worry about maybe storing up for kind of that big swing turn with the ship's cannon into the N'Zoth first made patches. You can just kind of play this like you would normally play Pirate Warrior, which is just try to build that strong curve, press the aggression, and just win out before the late game even begins.
Against Priest is really one of the classes where you have to try that the most as well. I think pushing against Priest is typically going to be the better option, just simply because the nature of the way that Priest fights back. They're fairly situational cards. They don't always show up. There's few of them in that situation. Heroic Strike is a huge draw for Control right here, though. He had no way to contest this 1/5 Northshire Cleric. It would have chewed through almost his entire board. Instead, now you're looking at MeknugetZz down a coin. No significant play this turn.
Yeah, that Northshire Cleric really early on against the Pirate Warrior is so brutal. Not only does it chew through minions, you're giving your opponent options in terms of maybe they didn't have a natural minion to play. They can at least draw cards.
And South Sea Captain gets drawn for Control. And if MeknugetZz chooses to play this Deathlord, that second South Sea Captain is going to do some work. But I can tell you what, South Sea Captain is scary. It's one you want to kill right away.
Yeah, the Shadow Word Pain just comes out. MeknugetZz doesn't even want to deal with that. Doesn't want to risk, something else potentially crazy happening. And their option for Bloodsail Cultist could buff that Rusty Hook up to a 2/3.
I like Captain still. Captain and Deckhand gets in a lot of damage. Does risk something strange like Auchenai Soul Priest and Circle of Healing. But I think that's a risk he's got to take right now. It's been two wonderful checked answers from MeknugetZz so far. A lot of damage sunk into those. He's got to make that up somewhere.
I guess the only issue for me is if the Auchenai Circle combo does come out, then you don't actually have the ability to get value with the Bloodsail Cultist. But yeah, you're just pushing. You're saying go.
Yeah, you're willing to lose in those situations because of the virtue of how rare it actually is. If MeknugetZz is playing a Kazakus list, it means that there's only one copy of each of those in there. If he's not playing a Kazakus list, it means that this extra damage does stack towards the critical mass point, where Reno Jackson won't be found in the list. So
that's fair. And with what limited information Control has, there's nothing yet that can really definitively say what archetype that MeknugetZz is playing. So he's just going with the strongest answer every single time.
Yeah, Powered Shield, 10 more damage that Control's going to have to get through, but he has a second Heroic Strike.
Ooh, that second Shadow Word Pain, incredibly powerful against the deckhand potentially. Now, with the second Powered Shield, that does give Control at least some degree of information. This is not a Kazakus Priest list.
Yeah, I believe he's assuming that's not the case anymore. And not only that, but he gets a refund on one of these minions as well. So his board is stacked to the brim.
And that is a good one.
Gets shipped out of the deck. MeknugetZz is down to 8 and has no way to significantly protect himself. That's game.
Korkron so powerful against Priest. Again, that 4 attack number. How do you deal with it? It pretty much had to be Dragonfire Potion, and he was already on 5 mana, so.
Nod of the head and the praise from Control. A sigh of relief to get out of that one. That one looked scary early on with that Northshire Cleric, but a critical draw on the Heroic Strike answering it right away. The second Heroic Strike playing a big role. The Korkron from the Deathlord. Sometimes Deathlord can shut down aggro, but sometimes it can punish you as well.
I mean, that's the downside of the card. That's why that card existed was, yeah, you get the big taunt, but I mean, if something like Korkron Elite comes off, then it's Korkron Elite. I mean,
He's elite.
He is elite. He is not Korkron normal. But, we talked earlier about how the Druids, the aggro Druids specifically, have kind of struggled against these slower control decks. Pirate Warrior really stood out to me as a deck that it's so powerful because it's just so much faster than the aggro druid. The aggro druid's thinking, okay, I'm going to stick a board. It's going to be hard to remove. Savage Roar comes out. We get that big combo turn set up. Pirate Warrior doesn't really work like that. Pirate Warrior just equips a weapon, starts bashing you in the face, and yeah, you can clear the board. Are you dealing with the weapons? It's so much you have to actually deal with that it really can just absolutely blow out control decks.
Yeah, its tools are just simply more flexible. You have the option to use them as extra damage or to play board clear until you get that big turning point that's in there. It's an absolutely wonderful point to bring up. It's just the addition of Ship's Cannon on top of that to have explosive turns. It's got all of the synergy of the rest of the aggressive decks, but it's also got the utility that you typically find in the early stages of control decks as well.
All right, well, for Game 3, we're going to have the old Priest mirror. So let's go ahead and take a look at how Priest has changed in Standard versus Wild. Nathan, is there anything that specifically stands out to you in Wild that the Priest doesn't have access to anymore in Standard that maybe makes a difference?
Deathlord is certainly the one that we highlighted the most in the previous game, but Velen's Chosen is up there as well. This was one of the primary Priest tools for securing an early board, landing a minion and then suiting it up and attacking over what they had. The additional health meant it was difficult for your opponent to deal with, and Priest has been moving more and more towards the Divine Spirit Inner Fire combos that we've been seeing as of late in Standard. The ability to burst your opponent out of nowhere is an important facet to almost every Hearthstone deck. Priest, even though its tools to do it are fairly weak, they are significant when they're coupled together. And that's why you see some of these risky cards like Deathlord and Velen's Chosen played.
Yeah, worth pointing out that the lists you're seeing up on screen are not necessarily indicative of what the players will be bringing. These are just kind of side-by-side comparisons of what Standard Priest versus Wild Priest could look like at the moment. I'm really excited to see this Priest mirror, though, because Priest, especially if it's double buff Priest with the Inner Fire Divine Spirit, it gets wonky.
It can get very wonky. And something that's really important to think about is the timing of your tools as well. Deathlord is a card in this matchup that can serve a very different dynamic than it typically does. Oftentimes in a Control Priest matchup, neither player can find significant footing to deliver that final blow. And so because of that, this can turn into a fatigue matchup. Oftentimes the minions can quite literally just get killed back and forth the entire game. When that happens, pulling those extra cards from your opponent's deck can be a big factor towards the end. So I'm curious to see what tech tools they've brought as maybe a consideration to a Priest mirror match.
Certainly, there are some powerful control tools that are kind of late game. Entomb, for example, a really powerful card if you're worried about the potential fatigue match. And, okay, we don't necessarily see anything here that spells out very clearly what these decks could be. We're just seeing some removal, some very standard early game minions. Wild Pyromancer, a very powerful control card for Priest. Cheap spells that are used to activate the ability, but nothing just yet that tells us exactly what this is.
Yeah, this could go still a number of directions. It could be relying on Lyra. They could be some N'Zoth builds with just a few death rattles in there. They could be more dedicated towards control. And like you said, you mentioned Entomb. Entomb is certainly a powerful card in the very long, grindy matchups. So I will be curious to see how the rest of these tools pan out. But in the early game, players are just simply looking to draw cards if they can. But you don't want to draw too many unless you understand exactly where your win condition sits. So I think that can give us some information about where the players are headed. But this is typically a buckle in for a long game style of matchup.
Right, we already saw MeknugetZz Priest on the prior game, so we have a little more insight into what he's playing. We've already seen the Velen's Chosen, the Deathlord. There's the Divine Spirit Inner Fire. So realistically, if you were looking for this style of Priest deck, this buff hit with a giant swing, this is kind of the starter pack of what you'd be looking for in Wild.
More importantly, we have Tyrande versus Anduin as well, so we get to see which Priest is undoubtedly more powerful.
I think there's a very clear answer to that without ever even playing this game.
Yeah, it's
Tyrande.
It's Thrall. Yeah. He's better at healing, he's better at damage, he's better at clearing.
I mean, that's the way it's been for a while.
Hey.
I'm actually having Here's a Storm flashbacks right now. Yeah. All right, well, we do see the Radiant Elemental come down, discounts the cost of spells by 1, but the only thing it was actually affecting was the Inner Fire, and it's too soon, Executus, too soon for Inner Fire.
Yeah, the big deal is that there's just multiple minions out that are above the 2 health mark, and that means there's extra card draw potential for control. So MeknugetZz is actually in a weird position here where his options are either to play the Cabal Talon Priest and forego the health buff, or to do nothing. If he plays Deathlord here, he's giving a lot of card draw over to control. And him seeing this Deathlord, plus this Power Word Shield, plus this Inner Fire, MeknugetZz is now put to the test very early on. Do you have a Silence or a Shadow Word Death? If the answer is no, meet a quick demise.
At least in Standard, a lot of those style of cards, the Shadow Word Death, the Shadow Word Pains even have been cut, so I like it, just saying like, okay, I'm going to put this out there, and if you don't have the answer, why would you keep it on the mulligan anyway?
Yeah, oftentimes those cards are so situational, it's just difficult to unleash them. And here, with having that extra 2 health, and as a result 2 power, means a lot for Control right now. He gets to bash through this. He gets a free minion, but now he can't heal. That was the absolute inverse of the minion he was looking for.
He can't heal, but he can buff with Velen's Chosen, so that may be a consideration he makes here is he wants to. He didn't see the Shadow or Death come out on his Deathlord before.
Oh, there's no Shadow or Death in MeknugetZz hand. He can very accurately conclude that that's missing. So I do like the Velen's Chosen in this spot.
Deals with the potential Holy Nova. I mean, Holy Nova doesn't do really anything else, but getting rid of the 10 attack minion is kind of a priority.
Whoa, look at this.
All right, I don't mind this actually at all. Go ahead and just split up the power. Make 2 targets, essentially.
Huh. I'm curious how I feel about this. Control...
How do you feel about it, Nathan?
Well, Control knows that this is a mirror match after he sees the Inner Fire come out. So the 2 players' decks are likely to be identical. He knows that this exact play is in the repertoire. So he gets to protect a large minion and continue to deliver damage in this spot. But MeknugetZz gets a second minion out of this.
He would have protected the Deathlord, though, as a thing, if he'd put the Velen's Chosen on the Deathlord, so...
Yeah. I like protecting the Deathlord.
And then the Akanai Soul Priest actually would have lived as well at 1 health, so...
And he'd have a Deathlord right now, and MeknugetZz wouldn't have a Deathlord right now.
I get the idea of spreading the power amongst minions to play around Shadow or Death, potentially, if Shadow or Death came off the top, but yeah, that is...
I think he played that a little wrong. I'm not going to lie. So he's looking at a coin here just as an expenditure for a board clear. Very solid play. Gets a refund of the minion himself. And MeknugetZz still under the gun. This Akanai Soul Priest is still a massive threat. And he has no way to check it. So board advantage still goes over to Control.
Do you tend to see Light of the Naru a lot in this deck?
Yeah, you do. And,
okay.
and one of the big reasons why is how it couples with Akanai Soul Priest.
Right.
Is you can target a minion that has 3 health, and it'll damage it down. And because the minion is still damaged after the Light of Naru effect, you actually spawn the minion afterwards. So it's a 1-mana answer that's flexible, and it can also help you find some tricky lethals in situations where your big minion's been damaged.
Sure.
And you need that little bit of extra health to secure the Divine Spirit Inner Fire combo. Also goes well with Wild Pyromancer.
I like it. All right, so we're just going to buff up the Northshire Cleric and kind of put our faith in this 1-drop that has now been souped up.
1 damage shy for Control killing it on board. I'm curious if he even wants to kill it. I mean, this is a lot of damage he can push in this situation. However, he does have Northshire Cleric, so there are some ways for him to draw a lot of cards, but that would draw MeknugetZz cards as well. So this board position has suddenly become very tricky with players throwing caution to the wind, saying, you know what? I don't think he's got Shadow Word Pain. I don't think he's got Shadow Word Death. I don't think he has a Silence. And they're right.
Control weighing out the options here. Does he want to go ahead and deal with this? I don't think he's seen the second Divine Spirit.
What?
So if he doesn't deal with that, if it is second Divine Spirit, second Inner Fire, that becomes a 28-28, unless you put damage into it. And that doesn't kill you, but when you don't know the deck list, you might be a little hesitant to really kind of gamble.
Yeah, I'm curious where this is headed. Maybe this is just face. Yep, he wants extra pressure, and he says, you deal with it. I like it.
No, you really have to sit down and think about the options. And he's saying look, I don't actually think you have anything to do this. I'm going to make you have it. And if you do, good on you. But I'm going to really just press towards my win condition.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Damage is this too, again, if second Divine Spirit Inner Fire comes out, then okay, it's 24 damage.
The other thing too is it's difficult for MeknugetZz to heal in this spot because of the Northshire Cleric on each side. So his options are either to clear more power off board and draw each player a card, or draw no player a card in this spot. And the second Northshire Cleric here is a big nuisance for MeknugetZz. I like the play. This is great aggressive play from Control.
Yeah, rough spot to be sure.
Ooh. And he caught himself. Notice he almost forgot that the other Northshire Cleric would draw the card. He hesitated and says, you know what, I don't have an option. I need this card.
In the light's name.
He needs health too. I mean, he's floating really low.
Staring down 9 damage on 11 health. Okay, so he's going to go up to 13. If he didn't heal there, a Holy Nova, which I don't believe is in this deck, but a Holy Nova would have done it.
Yeah. Oh, my. Wait. Wait. There's a lot of decisions to be made here, Control.
Control plays incredibly quickly. That is one thing I've certainly noticed about him.
He's going to give a card over to MeknugetZz. Wow. I am really surprised.
By the lack of control from Control?
Yeah. I mean, I see what his game plan is here. His game plan is he wants to use the Wild Pyromancer to wipe minions off board. But I think he had a lot of ways to do that. Oh, my. Oh, gosh, he can draw 7 cards. Oh, my. Oh, my. Well, that's bad news for MeknugetZz. Do you ever want to draw 7 more with the next Circle of Healing? I think that combo right there. That combo right there, I think, is too much for MeknugetZz to handle. He's got no way to return the card draw, and he's now been officially out-resourced.
Has to deal with the 19-2, though. It's something you're not leaving up.
The little Light Warden that could.
Yeah.
Oh, Auchenai gets drawn, too. And that's a 0-cost Light of the Narus. That's something else they can do is they can go straight to the Dome with the burn alongside Auchenai Soul Priest. Game 2,
so
I'm sorry, Game 3 going to Control now, 2-1 lead.
Control saw it, and this is one of those situations with this deck where at times the lethal isn't immediately present because you have to draw so many cards first, and he made so many drew so many cards, and he's like, oh, I just have lethal.
Got him.
I'm just get him.
Sometimes drawing 7 extra cards will just give you lethal. Who
It's
knew?
a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, if you have the option to draw 7 cards a lot of the time, you're probably going to want to do that.
Yeah, he like role-played old Force Nature Savage War Druid there that had Ancient Allures.
I mean, he didn't draw that many cards.
It's done. It's like, I've had enough.
No, it's best of 3, right? I'm out.
Not getting a better game than that one.
Yeah.
Quick
Yeah.
break for Control, but that deck really illustrating its power and showcasing a lot of what Wild is about. It's about these strong combos that individually the cards, you look at them and go, well, these are okay cards, but working together as a well-oiled machine is what these formats are about.
Certainly some interesting points to consider in that match. There were some plays where decisions were made, and this is a mirror match where it's not necessarily just play the tempo, play the removal, play minions. There's a lot of decision points to be made, so we'll go ahead and take a look at this. And again, speaking to how quickly Control played, plays the Deathlord, plays the shield, just goes ahead and said, Inner Fire, you got to have a Shadow or Death. If you do, good on you.
Yeah, and I think this is the right call to make, too. Silence is not super impactful here. MeknugetZz tries to answer back as well as he can. And this Auchenai Soul Priest coming out really put a hurt in the way Control was going to run this. I mean, his intention was the second Northshire Cleric Circle of Healing and get to that point. But here, when he suits up the Auchenai Soul Priest, it risks his Deathlord. So he is once again going into the face of that. If you have it, then sure, I will get punished. But I'm going for the huge payoff in these circumstances. I don't mind going for huge payoffs, but you do have to consider what it looks like when it fails.
I was going to say, so you had a problem with that play in real time. Now that you've seen the rest of the game plan unfold, is that something that still you would have rather seen the Velen's chosen on the Deathlord?
I think so. And I think if he Velen's chosen the Deathlord there, his Auchenai Soul Priest lives to the turn, his Deathlord lives to the turn, and I think there's very little to no recovery potential unless he sees exactly Auchenai Soul Priest, Light of the Naru, and Circle of Healing from that. Not necessarily in that order. The Circle of Healing first, so the Light of Naru token lives. But that it just increases the number of cards his opponent has to have in order to handle the board pressure.
All right, so game 4 is going to be Druid taking on Priest. MeknugetZz still looking for this win on that Priest. And up until this point, I want to point out, Control had kind of the mirror there, yes, but it seems like he had more removal than MeknugetZz actually had. And I think low-key that was kind of important, was the ability to have more removal. Yeah, the card draw ended up winning it for him, but there certainly appears to be some differences in the way these decks were constructed. Now, given that MeknugetZz, assuming we think that he doesn't have removal outside of Auchenai Circle, where does this put him against Aggro Druid?
Well, we did see Shadow Word Pain in the deck as well.
Okay, that's true.
He does have Wild Pyromancers. He does have the Potion of Madness as well. The deck is really well equipped to handle.
So you think he's actually just fine there?
Yeah, I think he's really well equipped to handle aggressive decks. The problem is going to be versus decks that maybe want to prioritize killing minions instead. So this Aggro Druid, we've continued to see it struggle on broadcast. This has been the tough point for every player's lineup thus far. Control now has 2 games to try to get the job done. And this is the first one. MeknugetZz threw away Deathlord in the opener, by the way. Very important thing to note. That's not something I would necessarily expect to see. With Coin, I do think there's a lot more merit to going for Wild Pyromancer, though.
Well, it does end up getting the Radiant Elemental Powered Shield. This is such a powerful combo. You see this a lot all-nighter these days. And you make a 2-5 that has the Sorcerer's Apprentice effect, and you're just saying, well, how are you going to deal with this?
Well, he's also got Belen's Chosen and Inner Fire to go with this. So you're looking at Edwin Van Elemental. Elemental Van Cleef? I don't know. How would...
I'm feeling Elemental Van Cleef. Thanks, production.
I think he's moving in here. Yep. It's hard to turn that one down. Oh, second guessing on the Inner Fire.
Savage Roar.
Wow.
I don't know about that. So Savage Roar there would have actually dealt with it, but you're pretty much taking the entirety of the board and just leaving whatever that Dragon Egg leaves behind, which would have just been the 2-1.
Well, this is a matchup where if MeknugetZz can stifle the board pressure, he will win the game. So I think there is a lot of merit to just simply trading here and saying, you know what, I'll eventually get the resources to push past this. You know, had he not taken that minion out, that's another 4 damage he would have suffered at the hand of this. So I think, in hindsight, it was very wise of him to not move in with the Inner Fire here and simply try to stabilize the board pressure. And he's got 2 copies of Zombie Chow now.
Yeah.
This is a great situation for MeknugetZz to fight back and just continue to stifle the board pressure turn after turn.
I feel like by the end of this game, we're going to need like the StarCraft-style kill count on this Radiant Elemental. It's just like 15 minions. Give him a medal.
You don't have to micro that one around as quite as much.
No. Although, if he wins, we get to shout GG, I think, as per the rules of cross-game casting. All right, so could just play the double Zombie Chow here. Would be foregoing the hero power. Could even choose to just double Zombie Chow, though, play the Circle of Healing. Feels like a little bit of a waste, but you are bringing that Radiant Elemental back up in health and presenting a 2-3 and then another 2-3.
That is your main threat to control at this point, is the Radiant Elemental, which is, you know, right now it's Archon. Yeah, move it. It starts killing stuff. It really does sit very StarCraft-esque. And Haunted Creeper is not the draw control's looking for at this stage. Jeeves would have been fantastic there for him.
So here's an interesting point. Yes, you put down the Acolyte of Pain. There's nothing with 3 attack, so nothing just clears your Acolyte of Pain in one go. But you are letting the Dragon Dragon Egg rather start getting value as well. What do you think of that?
I like where he's headed with this right now. I think the extra card draw means more for MeknugetZz than the extra bodies do for Control at this point. Control is living and dying on drawing a buff card at this stage. And if MeknugetZz can find anything to offset that, he's in a brilliant position. So I like that he's simply chosen to go for extra card draw here, try to find the right answers. And it's going to be even more so this turn. Northstar Cleric and continue to draw cards. Shadowward Pain.
So to point out, Savage Roar here is lethal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about that Zombie Chow as quickly as he played it.
He's clearly getting now where he's investing on the board. He really wants to draw the cards, but Savage Roar here just ends the game. Okay. Jeeves is good.
Savage Roar would have ended the game, actually, regardless of whether or not he would have Shadowward Pain, too. So quick spot by MeknugetZz, I'm guessing, is what did that. Inner Fire to try to protect the Northstar Cleric as well. If Control wants to attack into it, it's going to be more of a sacrifice. And I think this might be full steam ahead for Control. I mean, what merit is there to actually killing minions on board at this point? They're all going to do the same thing. They're going to kill your minions. Do any of them have more worth than the other? I have to say I'm a bit surprised. Circle of Healing could certainly be a card that he's fearful of right now. 3 fresh cards. Control's so close, he finds Savage Roar. Double Savage Roar.
Wow.
He's going to have 6 mana next turn. MeknugetZz finds Wild Pyromancer, though. And that could be the end of this board. That is a full board clear if he wants it.
I would imagine he wants it.
Radiant Elemental into Jeeves. Zombie Chow over Haunted Creeper. Wild Pyromancer, Shadowward Pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you want against a Druid. It really doesn't get any better.
I don't think it does. He uses the fewest number of tools. He keeps his minions as fresh as possible. You can even stick a second Zombie Chow and start threatening with the Alkanite Soul Priest. The Zombie Chow heals your opponent for 5, but
yes, the Druid can get rid of the Wild Pyromancer with the hero power, but interesting point if that's how it goes down.
Yeah.
Also can't play Living Mana on that turn, so.
A little bit of a missequence here for Control, or I'm sorry, just misplay from Control. He could have kept an extra power or extra health on the Radiant Elemental. I'm sorry for MeknugetZz in this spot, but the full clear is the relevant part of this. And Control now is in a heap of trouble. I don't think he gets out of this game.
Now that board is pretty big for the Priest.
Steady shot, no dice.
I mean, yeah, you can draw cards, but unless you draw into something that equalizes the board, which he's not going to.
Have to be Living Mana.
Do you ever consider just blowing up your own board, Nathan?
No.
Nope.
Not really.
No.
How much damage does he have here? So it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
There-
He does have 22 damage this turn, actually, with Alkanai Soul Priest and the Zombie Chows.
I was going to say, people may not necessarily know about that interaction if you haven't played in a while. Obviously, Naxxramas has been in Wild for some time, but if Alkanai Soul Priest is down and the Zombie Chows die, that healing is turned to damage.
Yeah, 5 damage.
So you have extra little nukes there.
Yep. Little nuke nuggets.
Little nuke nuggets.
Yep.
I gotta be honest, this guy's name just makes me actually just want nuggets. I just want to, like, go to some fast food and be like, yo, give me some nuggets.
I like the way he's been playing it, though. He was very deliberate on minion kills turn after turn, and that's kept him in a fairly safe position. I think he should be holding on to the Alkanai and Circle of Healing right up until he sees a Living Mana. I think it's the only card that gets Control back into this. No dice. No dice.
This should be lethal, though, for MeknugetZz.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, plus 10. Looks like lethal. He does have to spot that. You know, sometimes you get caught up in clearing minions so much that you just forget that Alkanai Zombie Chow damages them. But at this stage, I'm going to assume he spots it. You can see him counting it up right now.
Or thinking about nuggets.
Whoa. Maybe he doesn't see it.
Someone injured?
He doesn't see it. That's a miss lethal, but very unlikely to punish him in this spot. He's just so far ahead.
Still a chance to see lethal.
This is effectively lethal. There's nothing left for Control. Control's deck does not play defensive cards. It does not get out of the situation. Control is going to scoop it up, and that means MeknugetZz ties it up, and we're going to game 5.
Not miss lethal, extended domination.
That is something I have done before. Just pure extended domination. I'm like, got him. Hands off the keyboard.
Just take a loss, get a really extended win.
See the sigh there from MeknugetZz. Whew.
These games are intense. As we pointed out earlier, this has been a long bracket for these players to make it to this point. And again, with this being like the first chance for Wild players to kind of stamp their name and say, hey, I am a high-level player and you should know who I am at home, this is a big opportunity. So very stressful.
The very first Wild tournament that's taking place, and as TJ mentioned, this is a chance to make Wild history for these players. Qualify for the first tournament to win that first title. There's something special about being that first one, and it's hard to describe. But
it's like being the first world champion, Artosis. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Everyone remembers that Artosis was the first Hearthstone world champion.
Exactly.
Yeah. Will they remember that about MeknugetZz? We got to find out. Game 5
has to win game 5 if it's going to be the case. And Control, another try on the aggro druid. We continue to see it struggle.
Yep.
Game after game after game. The players got to this stage of the tournament with aggro druid in their lineup. I'm curious why it's struggling so much right here, right now.
I mean, obviously, there are a lot of different answers you can go down. You can say it's the compositions, right? The deck lineups they're facing up against it. The people that are winning also brought decks that fought a lot of aggro druid and had to get those wins. You could potentially say there have been some players. We've seen at least a couple things we disagreed with, but nothing that stood out egregiously per se. So, yeah, aggro druid is just a little bit slower than Control, or rather aggro warrior. So that might be the biggest factor.
The other thing, too, is to contrast it with Europe, where Europe, Druid was one of the 3 most popular decks. In the Americas, it's not in the top 3. So to see it to this stage, they've been performing the best. And as we get into Game 5, Control, he's playing against Pirate Warrior. He's got Galaka Crawler in the opening hand.
So in a 130-game sample size, at least in the Americas, Druid against Pirate Warriors had a 57% win rate. Or sorry, Druid against Warrior in general. So you have to factor in the some odd Control Warrior you run into Quest Warrior. But it has thus far been at least a slight margin of victory for the Druid.
Yeah. It's large part in Galaka Crawler, but the way the deck is built in general functions fairly well versus Pirate Warrior as well. The eggs provide a big presence alongside buffs. The ability to go wide on board with multiple minions and then pressure for lethals with Savage Roar, have Mark of the Lotus to buff up all your minions. Even down to the Echoing Ooze. That immediate board presence definitely makes a difference in this particular matchup.
Right, so MeknugetZz does get off the top of his deck. The Firefly allows him to make use of one of these innervates. Otherwise, was pretty much looking at not doing anything because you're not going to use that Crawler until you see a Pirate, or at least until you're sure it's some weird control deck.
That's right. MeknugetZz opener here, not very strong. No critical weapon with the Fiery War Axe, and really nothing really to get going here. MeknugetZz plan has to be to find a somewhat explosive turn to get multiple threats on board and try to punish control for maybe having a slower start than the deck typically will. So if control draws a buff in the next couple of turns, I think MeknugetZz is in a lot of trouble. But if MeknugetZz can find Ship's Cannon and one cheap Pirate, you're looking at the ability to easily turn the board around in a single turn.
Generally speaking, as a Pirate Warrior, obviously you want to be the one calling the shots. You're out there getting ahead and you're dictating the tempo and the pace of the match, but there are situations where on turn 1, playing the upgrade, getting the Rusty, or getting the weapon out there just so you can trade with 1 health minions is certainly relevant. But we see that's not even an option for MeknugetZz here. I mean, you don't live in a world where you think, okay, I equip a weapon and I kill a fire or flame elemental over 2 turns is any kind of good world to live in.
It certainly is an awkward one to be a part of, and not even going to use the Sir Finley here. Control, meanwhile, draws a buff, but that Galaka Crawler's, it's waiting in the wings. I don't know how often you get ambushed by a crab, but that's what he's looking for in this game.
Have you ever been on the beach at night? This actually happens a fair bit.
Oh, upgrade is a big draw for MeknugetZz here, too. Able to start chopping into the board and starting to get pirates down. I'm curious if he wants to even play a pirate this turn. Because, again, he's looking for an explosive turn where he gets multiple threats down at once. He wants to mitigate the impact that Galaka Crawler has against him. I mean, do you think you'd be playing it this way? Do you think you'd be taking it a bit slow?
It's hard to say. For me personally, I'd be looking at this and saying, okay, well, we have to start playing these pirates eventually. I mean, the aggro druid at some point, if you don't check the board... Now getting that second upgrade is huge because you can start checking the board, but if you're not, the aggro druid's just going to go too wide and then over time kill you with Savage Roar, so I think I'd like being a little bit more aggressive on the development, but to your point, I do think if you are expecting the Crawler to come out, being able to play multiple pirates on one turn, and maybe even getting a buffed weapon out of it, is certainly something that does mitigate, to your point, the effect of the Crawler.
I like the Fire Blast take over the life tap.
Yeah, you need things that interact with the board more.
The weapon is getting enough value, I think. And by the stage that the life tap would fully come into effect, it might be too late at that point.
On the other side now for control, that Galaka Crawler will just not be played until you see a pirate. You know pirates are in here. You don't get really that much value out of a 2-3. But the rest of his hand is just kind of...
And this really speaking volumes for the position he feels he's in this matchup, too. He's going to Living Mana for just 3 tokens. When you innervate, that is temporary mana. So you don't get the extra tokens from it. He says 3 2/2s is what I need right now to try to get this game done with. Ship's Cannon gets drawn. And is this the turn for MeknugetZz? Yes, it is.
I mean, you're at least going to get 2 bolts off the Ship's Cannon, so you're getting something there.
Is there any merit to simply trading the Finley in first to ensure that you can kill the 2-1, or would you rather have just the higher chance to hit minions? Because it is random damage.
I think I would just go ahead and put the... Yeah, I'd be putting the Finley into the 2-1, personally, before I actually fire those off. Because if it does go wrong there, it is just a missed opportunity.
Wow, I mean, what a turn for MeknugetZz. This was just such a big board swing. You know, Pirates, you think about an aggressive deck and you go, oh, it just plays minions and it goes face. In certain matchups and with certain tools, you play a more control-style game, and this is one of those situations.
It definitely, from a combo standpoint, has a lot of upside. Again, you see the Corsair, you see the Cultist, Patches, Ship's Cannon, especially in Wild. In Wild, really, the Ship's Cannon factor is just so huge in how you actually execute your turns when you have that minion in hand.
Yeah, and MeknugetZz going to choose to mitigate the mana from control in the following turn, rather than just kill a stronger minion.
Galaka Crawler waited 10,000 years, but was unleashed.
You are not prepared.
Did you think he had forgotten? Did you think he had forgiven?
Illidan Crab Rage.
All right, well, the Crawler does have his day. Goes ahead and takes out the Corsair, and
it's another big draw. A pirate to add and beefs up the weapon once more.
if he does it, though, he loses out on the ping, which maybe isn't necessarily a big deal because you have the 1/1 to just put into 3/1.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is definitely...
Just get stuff on board, too. You know, multiple minions in one turn is one of the best ways to fight these grindy aggro battles. You can pay a certain amount of life, so that way you can generate more advantage in a single position.
One thing that's kind of a neat interaction point is, whereas Jeeves is just generally good for aggro druid in a lot of matchups, Jeeves in this one is drawing your opponent cards too, because your Pirate Warrior is almost never on more than 1 to 2 cards, and even in Standard, that's more because you're holding the Mortal Strike, the Leroy, but in Wild...
Yeah. Like, how often do you want to just be like, oh, I'll draw 3 cards, but you can draw 3 cards too? Sure. Cold Light Oracle.
By the way,
it's great against aggro.
yours go faster.
Yeah.
Yours go a lot faster than my cards.
You get to, yeah.
Seems good. All right, well, now it's just the Pirates and the Crab. The Pirates looking for a little bit of payback here. We saw what you did.
Pirates of the Crab being.
Oh, can we get the grasshopper noises again? The cricket noises?
Not a good draw for Control at this point. It is looking grim.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't actually seen this interaction, but Echoing Ooze, if it is Savage Roared, loses the buff at the end of the turn, right? It doesn't? Okay.
It's a temporary buff.
Yep. Certainly one you have to try at least once, or have somebody tell you how that works, because you're like, this should work, right?
He's looking at using just the Savage Roar this turn, and honestly, I don't mind it that much. This allows him to clear both minions. It makes the last charge of, or one of the last charges of MeknugetZz weapon go into that. And at this stage, Control has to just hope that there's not significant pressure from MeknugetZz. And there, it's gonna be. South Sea Captain alone doesn't look like much, but an uncontested 3/3 will pile on damage.
I was going to say, if you were going to ping the Crab, I think you would not be playing the South Sea Captain there.
Oh, no.
So go ahead and just ping the face, swing in, and say, okay, I have the board now. Wow. Double Echoing Ooze. That's interesting.
That could potentially give him enough pressure to stabilize a bit. Control is pretty far ahead on life, and MeknugetZz is floating at 16, and his armor up's gone. So if he wants to fight back onto this board, it means the South Sea Captain's set up to die. A brilliant attack from Control using his life total. The fact that he's so far ahead gives him this spot. Spellbreaker, it's a 4/3 body, but there are a lot better draws in the deck than that right now.
Spellbreaker isn't really a minion we're seeing too terribly much of in Wild either in this deck, I feel like.
Look at this. MeknugetZz gonna push. What's the best draw in Control's deck right now? Living Mana is great.
So Living Mana is really powerful. It kind of depends what MeknugetZz does here. If MeknugetZz does the trades, then Power of the Wild, Mark of the Lotus suddenly becomes a lot worse. But
one of the trades goes in. That's another brilliant attack from MeknugetZz too. Is just to simply counter pressure and force Control into a position where he maybe can't use his life total so as aggressively as he just was. But now Control has to make a decision. Do I push this damage face? Do I trade it all? I don't think he trades. Honestly, I think he's favorable to race right now.
I would put a 2/3 into the 3/2.
Giddy up. That's what I say. Control. He sees the lines. Down to 8. MeknugetZz. Death Spite will allow him to completely clear this board off if he wants. But then he's down to 6. Control at 21.
I mean, he definitely has the window to win potentially.
Wait a minute. What if MeknugetZz just goes face? No, seriously. How much damage is this over 2 turns? So if he plays Death Spite and he swings to face, that's 17 to Control. He has 7 on board, drops him to 10. Heroic Strike's down to 6. Hero Power down to 5. He's got Hero Power down to 4 and Death Spite down to 0. Control will go up 1 life total from his Hero Power. I mean, a draw of damage would end the game for MeknugetZz, but if he does that, any buff from Control will win the game.
Wow, these are some ballsy plays from both of these guys.
My gosh, MeknugetZz is moving all in against Control. Control looks so stressed. Dead draw.
both players took their chips and said, hey, center of the table now.
And if Control's going to live, he's got to sacrifice his whole board. This was a brilliant move from MeknugetZz. This whole game has been played so savagely from both sides. That's a sinking feeling.
I just want to say we can discuss it after, but not trading into the 3-2. I know the reasons why you don't, but...
I like to play on both sides, honestly. And Control is going to say, you know what? You have to have an extra point of damage to kill me in this spot. Control has to have a way to actually end the game. He's going to play full defense.
He has to.
Second heroic
doesn't
strike.
matter, though.
MeknugetZz draws the damage for lethal. And that's going to do it. 3 games to 2 over Control. Nail-biter game at number 5. Unreal.
Now the Pirate Warrior just ekes it out. This one was back and forth. I feel sometimes we overuse the term slobber knocker, but that's exactly what this was in the end.
Oh, yeah. Those last couple turns, I think that it was the right call from both sides to threaten the top deck of lethal. If MeknugetZz had chosen to play that game defensively, there is a good chance he wouldn't have been anywhere close to the damage to end as soon. That gives Control a number of turns. If Control doesn't push, it means that MeknugetZz never has to be in a position where maybe he falls into the trap of playing defense in that one. I think that last game it looks a little unsophisticated, but there's a lot of thought going into the draw range from each players.
Yeah, we'll take a look at it again. I am very curious. I'm willing to say in the end you're probably right that you don't trade into that 3-2, but I feel like leaving that out, Salsi deckhand would charge suddenly a 3 damage minion. Maybe it doesn't necessarily matter all that much. We will actually take a look at it. So Nathan, break this down.
From his perspective, the Salsi deckhand is not even a threat in this spot because there's no weapon in play at the stage. So he sees the weapon play. MeknugetZz here, he has the option of clearing the board, going down a low life total, and being nowhere near killing Control. In this spot, though, he goes, you know what? I'm just not going to beat him if I do that. So he has to risk everything. He goes full face and says, if Control doesn't draw damage, I'm going to win this game.
It's just interesting to me because you're playing the deck that draws more direct damage, right? You could have drawn a Korkron. There are other things you could have drawn that win you that situation, but both players just deciding, okay, I can't trade. If I trade, I lose. I like it. It's grown man Hearthstone right there.
just giddy up, go face.
Yeah.
It's one of the best ways to do it when you're in those situations too. Like if you think about his draw potential to actually get out of the game, imagine he sinks that 11 points of damage to minions instead. Like no way he's gonna win. He has to take 2 to have that happen too. It's just right call is push the damage. There's a time and a place to simply throw caution to the wind, and that is just a prime example of one of them.
I mean, and does it get any more fitting? Game 5, winner advances, loser stays at home, doesn't even have to leave the room, just kind of go back to the bed and sulk. But like, realistically, that's a situation where you kind of want that big buildup of both players just all on the table.
It's pure. It's pure. When the players put their wits and will against luck and everything comes up even, the cards have to decide the rest. And I think in that game 5, it was played close to perfect on both sides.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at where we stand in the bracket for the Americas portion of the Wild Open. Control versus MeknugetZz. MeknugetZz barely manages to scrape a win, get out of there. Control, still a great series from him, and I like the fact that we'll be able to continue to watch him play Wild. This is, again, he's a big-time streamer. He plays on Fade to Karma, so definitely check him out. It's twitch.tv/controltheboard to learn more about Wild.
Yeah, he's also got a second opportunity here. We're going to see Silent Storm versus Jinja Ninja up next. Silent Storm, the most notable name left remaining in the tournament, had a fantastic amount of success early on in his Hearthstone career, been a bit quiet, but he's back in the scene.
All right, well, let's take a look at who MeknugetZz will be joining at the Hearthstone Wild Live Finals taking place in July. From China, it's Shenhai Yuyi, SH Royal Baze, and Europe has General and Alb 987. 3 players left. Still, 3 more players left to be decided. 1 from the America, 2 from Asia Pacific.
Yeah, the Asia Pacific, of course, will be taking place right after America's a little bit later on. 5 of the 8 have been decided. 2 more matches until we find our next.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the schedule moving forward. It is going to be Asia Pacific up after these next 2 Americas bracket matches. Asia Pacific, again, home of some of the best players, some of the most wild players. How fitting it is that they're going to be competing in wild. But we're going to take a quick break before we get into our next match. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.